Welcome everyone to Summer Tomato Live, your interactive online classroom where I teach you everything you need to know about the food and health topics that are the most fun and interesting. I'm your host, Darya Pino, and I am also the creator of the website Summer Tomato, where you can find even more healthy eating tips for food lovers. Summer Tomato is also where you can go after the show to find any show notes or links that I mentioned during the show, or if we have any discussions where I have to clarify something, I'll go ahead and do that about a week from now when I publish this on Summer Tomato. So today we will be discussing soy, which, as we've seen on all the social media platforms today, is a very controversial topic. So I've spent the last few weeks sort of digging through the literature, and when I say that, what I mean is I go to PubMed and I, research soy and everything that I've heard about it. So its role in breast cancer and all that, prostate cancer, hormone levels, all that stuff, and see what the actual science says, and see what I could come up with in terms of what you should actually do and what the take-home messages are from all that science. So yeah, basically some people are saying that soy prevents cancer, some people think soy promotes cancer, and other people claim that it's evil and gives you man boobs, and none of those things are cool. But we'll talk about all that today. So if you have any questions during the show, you're welcome to use the chat room. However, I cannot promise that I'm monitoring it very closely because sometimes people just sort of go off on their conversations and it moves too fast for me to keep an eye on. So what I'd like you to do if you have a question is use that little ask a question button should be over in the right-hand corner over there. And you can either submit a text question, or so you can write in a question. And it's better to submit questions there because then I can put it up on the screen so the people who watch this later on iTunes can see it as well. Or you can call in and have a video chat with me. I would love for you to do that. If you do, though, just make sure you have some iPod or whatever earbuds so that there's no feedback. So all you need really is a microphone and headset. So please do that if you're going to call in. And let's see, if you aren't watching live but want to participate in future episodes, you can sign up at tinyletter.com/summertomato, which of course is the URL at the bottom of the screen. And I still haven't worked out the schedules for the next few weeks, but there will be shows in the next probably 2 weeks from now. And if you have any recommendations on topics, I'm taking those now. So if you're a subscriber, just shoot me an email, or if you're following on Twitter or whatever, just shoot me an @reply and I will consider your topic choice. All right, so on to soy. So I wanted to get started quickly because there's a lot of stuff to go over for soy, and I know that you guys are going to have a lot of questions. I've had more questions about this actually than any other show topic so far. So, so basically I ask my my newsletter subscribers if they have any questions, and I got a flood of questions, mostly the same question over and over again. But I know a lot of people have questions about soy because it's very controversial. So why is soy so controversial? Let's talk about a little bit first, just so we all are on the same page in terms of what soy actually is. So soy is a legume, which is another word for bean, and it's a plant, and it's commonly eaten in Asia, as many people know, and also in America. And in Asia, it's largely eaten as either fermented soy, and so the Japanese and some other cultures will ferment soy into miso, or natto is another form of fermented soy. It's kind of a pasty, goopy stuff. Or tempeh, which is popular in Indonesia. Or they eat soy as raw soybeans or cooked soybeans, or as curd or tofu. So they're all different kinds of soy, and it makes up a large part of many Asian cultures. In America, though, soy has a slightly different function. Sadly, it's become the second or third most common ingredient in most junk food. So basically, soy is pretty much the most available source of protein and fat from plants. So whenever any junk food people need those ingredients, as opposed to if they want carbohydrates or sugar, they go to corn. But if they want plants, or if they want fats, or if they want protein, they go to soy. And the other big one is wheat. And whenever they want starch or gluten or anything like that, they go to wheat. But so soy is a big one in junk food, unfortunately. Mostly the oils and the proteins is processed. And what they learned to do, sometime back a while ago, learned to hydrogenate soy oil, and what that does is it gives you the ability to change the consistency of the oil. So normally plant oil is liquid at room temperature, but if you hydrogenate it, you can sort of add a kind of fat saturation to it, and it makes the food companies have a very high degree of control over the consistency of food, which is why Twinkies and Little Debbie cake bars and Snickers bars have that weird consistency that you kind of learn to love. It's chewy and good. They do that stuff by hydrogenating the oils, but unfortunately, this is also what creates trans fat. So sadly, soy is probably the number one source of trans fat in the American diet. So. Right. So, the other big thing that soy is used for in America, it's grown largely to feed meat, cattle, and so they fatten up cows, beef cattle, on soy and corn frequently. And of course, but I know, of course, all of you guys, very health conscious and environmentally conscious people, you all buy grass-fed beef, right? Because it's the natural cow diet. But if you do get industrial beef, be aware that what the cows are eating is not grass, not their natural diet, but corn and soy, so they get fatter faster. But soy has a lot of benefits too, right, that we all know about. So soy is rich in antioxidants that are called isoflavones. When I was searching the literature, that word kept coming up a lot. And particularly a class of these isoflavones called phytoestrogens. And they're named phytoestrogens because their molecular structure is very similar to the female sex hormone estrogen. And as you might expect, when you eat a lot of soy, if you're bringing in a lot of these phytoestrogens, it actually does have some sort of impact on hormonal pathways in humans and other animals. So changing hormone levels can have both positive and negative consequences. So, for example, oh, hello, Toaster. My puppy just got a haircut. He's a little shy. Sorry, but right. So one of the things that soy has been used for is for treating menopause symptoms, and it's actually been somewhat effective in that regard for very mild symptoms. Eating extra soy can help with that. But of course, hormones are also problematic, and hormone imbalances can be associated with certain cancers, especially reproductive cancers like breast cancer, cervical cancer, prostate cancer. All those things are all related to hormone imbalances, and when you start throwing in a bunch of extra estrogen in there, they can potentially have an effect. And we'll look at the literature and we'll talk about whether or not it does, and which cancers need to be, which ones are relevant in the soy debate and which ones are not. So let's start by talking about breast cancer, because I got a lot of questions about this. I get questions about this all the time. People are always asking me about it. And basically, breast cancer is frequently sensitive to estrogen levels and sometimes caused by excess estrogen levels, so for example, one of the reasons that overweight women especially, tend to have higher rates of breast cancer is because aromatase, which is one of the enzymes that creates estrogen, is present in fat cells. And so when you have extra fat cells, you're going to have extra estrogen around, and that can promote breast cancer. So then the question is, if you're having a lot of soy and having a lot of extra plant-based estrogen coming in, is that going to be bad for breast cancer? Well, it turns out that the opposite is probably true. So for those of you who are familiar with the epidemiological data, that is the data that compares populations and compares their diets, you probably know that Asian cultures that eat a lot of soy tend to have lower breast cancer rates than Western cultures. And so, in fact, there seems to be quite a bit of data suggesting that soy actually protects against breast cancer. But I was hoping that this was going to be sort of universally true. But what seems to be true is that it's actually only been shown in Asian cultures. So when you look at Asian cultures, the women who do eat the most soy tend to have lower rates of breast cancer. But the same is not true in America. And it's America and Europe, Western cultures. And it's not clear why that is. It might be what I explained earlier, which is that, the quality of the soy is very different in America versus Asia. Also, there's the issue of fermented soy, which I mentioned earlier, which has actually very different health benefits from unfermented soy or tofu. So, you know, Americans, we eat a lot. We don't eat a lot of soy compared to Asian cultures, but those who do are not usually eating miso and natto and tempeh. They're usually going to be eating tofu, drinking soy milk, or just eating plain soybeans. So that could be what the difference is. Not necessarily, you know, it's probably not just the like trans fat. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like health conscious Americans. There doesn't seem to be a big benefit of eating soy in terms of breast cancer. But I had a lot of people like ask me specifically, I'm using soy milk. Should I stop using soy milk and switch to almond milk because I might get breast cancer? Well, you might want to do that. You might want to switch away from soy milk. I'll get to why actually at the end of the show, but it's probably not because of breast cancer. It's definitely not because of breast cancer. Soy does not give you breast cancer. If anything, it might be protective, but the data for that is really weak. So that is my take on breast cancer. Yeah, so James in the chat room asks if this form of soy can determine the side effects. It seems to be the case. There's certain, and I'll get into specific cases soon. But we talked earlier, and I'll link to this in the show, the probiotics episode that we discussed. There are very good benefits from fermented soy products in some cases. In some cases, actually, it's worse, and I'll get to that in a second. So. All right. So, and another thing that might be relevant with this, why soy is more beneficial, seems to be in Asian cultures, could potentially be the way it interacts with other aspects of the diet, such as seaweed. So seaweed has a lot of iodine, and soy, like as a combination, soy and seaweed may interact in a certain way that's beneficial because they do sort of interact in the same pathways. When we talk about thyroid stuff, we'll talk about that a little bit more. So I have a zillion meta-analyses and studies that I found that are relevant to this. I picked out my favorite ones, and I'm going to go ahead and add those to the show notes next week. So you can read all this stuff for yourself there. So the next cancer specifically that I wanted to talk about for soy is prostate cancer. So like I mentioned before, prostate cancer is another one of those sort of reproductive organs, and it can be sensitive to hormone levels and particularly cancer. And actually, it does seem that soy does result in a moderate reduction of prostate cancer. That's pretty consistent. And it also helps create less severe prostate cancer, which is important. And what I found with the soy is that it might actually be a greater benefit if you use unfermented soy products for prostate cancer. So tofu specifically is more beneficial, it seems, in protecting against prostate cancer than maybe miso or tempeh or anything like that. So always the question I get when I start talking about estrogen and cancers, and then I say protective against prostate cancer, then people instantly start asking me if soy demasculinizes men. So there's a lot of rumors about this, and I don't know if any of you guys have heard this, but there's a fear that if you're eating, like men don't want extra estrogen, right? That's not good. Although it might protect somewhat against prostate cancer. What if can you have too much? Can it cause problems? And so there is, and this is not unfounded. So there is a lot of data actually that would be scary. That if I were a man, I'd definitely be scared looking at it sort of superficially when you look at the data. So basically, a lot of the research, as you guys might know, is done in rodents. And the rodent studies are really scary. So there's a lot of rodent studies suggesting that soy, messes up their sperm counts, causes too much, or, basically demasculizes them, makes them unattractive to females, does all sorts of bad things, and, reduces fertility, reduces libido. All these things have been shown in rats and mice, and it's, something to be alarmed about. But, it is important to remember that mice and rats are not the same as humans, and when the studies started being conducted in higher primates like macaque monkeys and in humans, none of these really panned out. So it doesn't seem to be dangerous. So I found basically a consensus of meta-analyses and review articles that also that there's no evidence for this in human men or monkeys. So when you look at the monkeys, also there was no issue with hormones or demasculinization or any problems like that. The only case that I found, so we're not completely out of the water, but I did find one case suggesting some sexual problems associated with very, very, very high soy consumption. But and it's just one case study that I found, and I'll post it on the show notes. But basically, this guy showed loss of libido, erectile dysfunction, low testosterone, high DHA, which is the precursor to testosterone, meaning it wasn't like, sort of backing up and not becoming testosterone in the body like it's supposed to, and that wasn't good. And they were able to correct it by reducing his soy intake. But there was a really important caveat of this. First, this guy was vegan. So he was using soy as his main protein source, and he was eating tons of soy, like 100 times, or maybe, is it 100 times? Yeah, like something on the order of like 100 times, or a little less than 100 times what everybody else would normally eat in terms of the amount of soy. He also had type 1 diabetes, which means he already metabolically, he wasn't normal. So, if you're eating, I would definitely not think it's a good idea to eat ridiculous amounts of soy. That being said, there are people eating moderate to high amounts of soy all over the world that are perfectly masculine. So I wouldn't necessarily worry about it. If you're vegan and you thought like soy was the healthiest thing in the world, or a vegetarian, or even if you just thought soy was the healthiest thing in the world and you're eating it 5 times a day just because you think it's healthy, you're definitely doing the wrong thing. You should eat it in moderation. But if you're just a regular person, moderate amounts of soy, especially men, like you don't have to worry about eating tofu here and there, drinking soy milk here and there, eating miso or anything like that. You don't have to worry about it. And if anything, it looks like it might protect you against prostate cancer in small amounts. So like most things, a small amount can be helpful. And in this case, a moderate amount to even a fairly high amount, like is eaten in Asian cultures, is probably helpful. It's just when you go batshit crazy and start eating it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner that you run into a problem. This is also true of water. This is also true of alcohol, like we talked about in a blog post this week on summer tomato. So, don't go nuts. You should never go nuts on anything. But you don't have to worry about like losing your manliness or anything like that from eating soy. So I hope that alleviates many of you dudes' problems that you're worried about. So one other disease I wanted to talk about that's sort of related to this hormone issue, and it's because it's related to estrogen, is osteoporosis. So one of the biggest risk factors for osteoporosis is actually how much estrogen and calcium you have as a young person, especially women. And another problem is, your bones start degrading once you hit menopause and you have less estrogen around. And so it made sense to study the potential benefit of soy in protecting against osteoporosis, especially for women. And the studies have been mixed results, but there does seem to be, I'd say, a small benefit in soy consumption for lowering osteoporosis risk, which is good. And I will post those studies on that. It seems like it's particularly beneficial for postmenopausal women. So if you're, over 60 or whatever, and you're starting to go through life changes and, you're worried about osteoporosis, you're worried about menopause anyway, it seems like, having soy be part of your regular healthy diet is probably a pretty good idea. What else? Heart disease. So heart disease is another thing. Like when I just started searching through the soy literature, heart disease came up a lot. And I think there was a big emphasis, several decades ago in the scientific community that was curious if it was really a good thing to sort of replace meat with soy. Like, the question was that healthier? And so it wasn't just about the saturated fat versus, the healthy omega-3 fats, which are in soy. well, they're healthy before you hydrogenate them and turn them into trans fat. But maybe does the soy protein itself, is that beneficial in heart disease? And I didn't find anything that the protein itself, yeah, actually I did. I found a little bit that the protein itself might be helpful. So but let me just sort of explain some stuff. So almost all the studies, and this drives me nuts, almost all the studies that are curious about the effect of some food or whatever on heart disease, instead of going and measuring artery thickness or doing a long-term study and measuring heart attack endpoints or mortality or stroke or anything like that, they just measure changes in LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol. Those are like the sort of measures they use. More recently, studies have been a little better in focusing more on the quality of the HDL cholesterol and the so you want high HDL cholesterol and you want low triglycerides. But for the most part, most of the studies I found relating soy to heart disease were talking about its effect on LDL cholesterol. So there are small benefits on LDL cholesterol. So total cholesterol is lowered a little bit. Low LDL cholesterol is lowered a little bit. And HDL cholesterol seems to either not change or go up a little bit. And those are all considered beneficial biomarkers, beneficial signs about heart disease. But I couldn't find any study that actually measured heart disease directly. So, I don't think that, like, if you want to protect against heart disease, I don't think soy is your best bet. I'd say eating unprocessed foods, cutting out sugar, getting exercise, eating a vegetable-rich diet, and having a glass of wine every now and then is going to be better for you. But, it was worth talking about because, 20 years ago, this was, like, really, really important in science. And, like, all these papers, the papers are recent, but, I think we're finally getting to the point with this heart disease stuff that, it's really seems to be more about sugar and processed foods than it does about meat, per se. So I have a bunch of studies. I'm going to put them up for you to see. So I already talked about. I found one study that actually looked at mortality, and the only group of people that they found soy to be beneficial in was a group of postmenopausal Japanese women. So if you're a postmenopausal Japanese woman, there's a small reduction in heart disease mortality if you eat a little bit more soy. But that's it. For most people, I couldn't find anything valuable. And neither could the American Heart Association. This was one other thing I wanted to bring up. The American Heart Association reviewed all this data, and they agree that there's no benefit of soy for heart disease that's worth telling people to change their diet in the population. They did say that it's not harmful, which is good. It's good to know that most things mostly aren't harmful. But let's talk about the thyroid before we start pretending soy is too much not harmful. So I actually am. There's a lot of people with thyroid problems. Like I've been getting a lot of emails lately about them, and it seems Oprah has complained about thyroid issues and all. It seems to be becoming more of an issue. We talked a lot in the salt episode about this, which was last week's episode. By the way, you can find that on summertomato.com. If you go to the live tab, I have a link down there for past episodes. Also, on my YouTube channel, which is daryapino.com or YouTube /Darya Pino, just my whole name, one word. Or on iTunes, you can just search Summer Tomato Live and subscribe to the podcast. But on that episode, we had a discussion about how iodine is a problem, and it can cause thyroid problems if you have low iodine, and so cutting out iodized salt can be problematic. And we also talked about how we talked about in office hours last week how seaweed can help raise iodine levels as a natural source of iodine that is independent of using more salt in your food. So, but all this comes back to thyroid issues, and I've read before that there's a potential for soy to be very negative for people with hypothyroid, so that's low functioning thyroid. And so I definitely took some time to go through the data and look at this more thoroughly. And from what I can tell, it depends on who you are, whether or not soy is a problem for thyroid. So for normal, healthy people, it seems it's not a problem. However, if you are already potentially hypothyroid, and this can be even hypothyroid that's not like at the clinical level where you haven't had to go to the doctor yet, or maybe you're just feeling tired and you don't know why. In case you do have subclinical hypothyroid, which is what that is, it could be a problem to have extra soy. So the issue here for us, for people watching, is if you don't know if you're hypothyroid, that's a problem, right? So that's something to consider before thinking that soy is completely harmless for you. It's because in the people that did have hypothyroidism, soy made it worse and made it progress worse. So I think that's, considering how many people have been emailing me about thyroid problems, I think that's really important. And if you're having issues with fatigue, and I think it affects weight management and all sorts of things. It's check your symptoms against thyroid problems, and if you're worried, go ask your doctor to do some tests, and then you can make informed decisions about your diet, because it's impossible to give diet recommendations that are going to fit everyone. Everybody's different, and your metabolic baseline is very essential in deciding what's best for you. And that's why everyone's different, and that's why one diet is never going to work for everyone. So, but it's important to know where you stand and what your baseline is. So if you're worried about these things, check in with your doctor and plan accordingly. So one of the most interesting questions that I got from a reader was a study that he sent me, that he was concerned that soy could negatively impact memory. And he sent me a study that looked at tofu intake in a population of elderly Indonesian men, and it showed that they had worse memory. Like it was high tofu intake was correlated with worse memory. And what was interesting was that this had corroborated evidence from a previous study, the Honolulu Asian Aging Study, that found that increased dementia markers and cognitive impairment were correlated with high tofu consumption as well. So, what's up with that? So the study he sent me actually showed something really interesting, though, which was that while it was true of tofu, it wasn't true of fermented soy products. In Indonesia, the number one fermented soy product is tempeh, and they use miso as well. And so then what is chemically and molecularly different between tofu and fermented soy? And it turns out like I said, what people are usually measuring with soy is the isoflavones and the phytoestrogens and all that stuff. But it turns out both products are very high in those. So that's probably not the reason that there's anything different. And the authors of the story speculate that it's possible that since the fermented products tend to have higher folic acid or folate, which is an essential vitamin that's really important for cognition and neural development in general. Like folate is what pregnant women have to take so their babies don't get neural tube problems. That maybe that was protective against whatever problem was potentially being caused by the high phytoestrogen content. But I don't know about that. Like, I'm skeptical of this. I found a few studies online that showed that the cognitive effects of some soy products were beneficial for rodents, and a few human studies as well. Not very strong, though, and it showed, there were different kinds of memory tests, so I don't know how carefully they measured memory problems in these studies. And also, someone went back later and went to the same Indonesian population and revisited them and found a different effect. So they didn't find a problem in elderly Indonesian men, And it seemed that soy consumption in the younger group and the younger population, which they didn't measure in the first study, that was actually better. So they had better memory. So, you know, I would say that I wouldn't put too much worry into worrying if soy is associated with memory problems, because it would only be tofu, and it just doesn't seem like the data is holding up right now. So I wouldn't worry about it. These are correlational studies. They're not random controlled, placebo-controlled, double-blind, anything like that. And they're not even prospective studies. So, you know, I wouldn't worry too much about that at this point. Keep an eye on it. And like I said, there's a lot of other reasons to not eat like crazy amounts of tofu anyway. But I'm still at the point where I think moderate amounts are going to be healthy and, you know, potentially protective for some people in certain cancers and stuff. But there's a little bit more to soy than all this stuff. And I think this is really important. So, okay, how do I get started here? Okay, so one of the major important differences between soy in America and traditional soy consumption in Asia is that most of the soy that we get in America now is genetically modified. So Monsanto, which is a company that, you know, is like a food processor and grows most and sells the seeds for most of the soy products that are used in this country, has a patent on a gene that makes it the soybean resistant to this pesticide that so it prevents it from dying, so they can like spread, it's called Roundup. So the pesticide is called Roundup, and the soybeans have this gene that makes them Roundup ready. And they are like they're everywhere. Like that's almost all the soy that you're eating is these genetically modified soybeans. And Monsanto has a patent on the genes, and there's a lot of problems with this. First, I mean, it's really bad for the environment because it's creating, well, there's the pesticide issues, there's the monoculture issues. This is the fact that these soybean genes are contaminating regular soybeans. Like, if you haven't seen Food Inc., the movie Food Inc., I highly recommend you do. It'll go into this stuff quite a bit, and you'll see how damn evil Monsanto is and how they are dealing with this entire situation. And so, personally, I don't trust any of that stuff, and I don't eat it. And while there's not been any proven health detriment from the gene itself, the genetic modification itself, these soy products have a ton of pesticides. They're grown in monocultures in depleted soil. Not necessarily the healthiest. It definitely is not comparable in my estimation to soy grown naturally on the other side of the world. So that's something to consider, and it's really, really hard to avoid. So, I mean, I pretty much stopped drinking soy milk and there's one more issue. So China's also changed the way they do things, and there's been a lot of food safety issues coming out of China over the last 5 years. It's mind-boggling. I linked to a post a few weeks ago. I'll link to it again. It was written by Mark Bittman of the New York Times about how out of control the food safety scene is in China. They have like exploding watermelons and blue glowing pork and all sorts of crazy stuff. And a lot of the soy milk I liked and used to use before was this brand called Silk. I thought it tasted the best. I found out like they got bought by this bigger company, Dean Foods, and started buying their beans from China. And like, I'm not going to, like, China has put melamine in baby formula. Like, they killed babies because they wanted to make more money. They wanted it to be cheaper. And so I don't trust anything coming from China until they get their government gets a hold of their food safety stuff. And, you know, when you're getting, the American soybeans are mostly Monsanto genetically modified, scary stuff that's ruining farmers and ruining our environment. And the Chinese stuff is, you know, could be killing babies and pets and all that stuff. I just kind of, anything with soy in it, I mean, I'm not crazy about it, but I generally don't eat industrial tofu, just put it that way. I am lucky I found a really good spot here at my farmer's market that has, they're very careful about where they get their beans. They get them from a small U.S. farmer that does all organic and it's all natural, and I believe they're out in Alabama, the farm is, and it's called Hodo Soy. And if I get the England for some tofu, sometimes I do, I buy it from them. And there's a few other good brands. That's not the only one, but I would recommend being very careful where you get your soybeans, because you don't really know where they're coming from. It's sort of hard, and I don't trust them personally. So, that's a personal choice. Small amounts of anything, I generally think aren't going to kill you. But just be aware that there's all these other issues around soy, and it's not just, is this plant healthy or not? It's not the same as saying, is an apple healthy? Soy is a whole different can of worms. So I just wanted to end on that note. And so I'm happy to talk about any of this or answer questions or anything. I see there's already a question in the queue, and I'm happy to take it. Okay, this is a really good question. So Shannon asks, should soy be one of the primary sources of protein? If not, what should? So I talk about this a little bit in the healthy vegetarian and vegan diet episode, which of course I'll link to. There's a weird thing where people worry that they're not getting enough protein. Everybody gets enough protein. In first world countries, this is not a first world problem. So that, beans besides soy, have protein. I eat beans a lot. I love them. Beans and lentils, they're delicious, they're filling, they make you lose weight, they're amazing. Grains also have protein too. Fish is a great source of protein. Thank you, Virginia, for pointing that out in the chat room. Meat is still an excellent source of protein. Eggs are an excellent source of protein. I recommend mixing it up, not just getting it from one place. Cheese is a good source of protein. This sort of, I'd say, myth that your protein needs to be complete, which means that it can't be lacking any amino acid, is sort of irrelevant if you're eating a diverse diet. So yeah, if you're subsisting only on corn and greens, you're going to be missing lysine, and it's going to be a problem. But if you're eating beans regularly, eggs regularly, grains regularly, fish, meat, you can be totally vegetarian and get plenty of protein, way more than you need, without ever touching soy. So, it can be a healthy source of protein. Like I said, I eat soybeans, and I get my tofu from these places that are great, but you definitely don't need it to be. So definitely don't worry about that. I hope that answered your question. Oh, this is interesting. So James wants to know, what is my opinion of Japanese soy products? Well, I don't really have an opinion. I know that Japan definitely doesn't have the food safety issues that China has. Their regulations are much more strict. That being said, they do like their junk food, and be careful so hydrolyzing soy is not good. I think that creates MSG. One of my readers told me that the other day. Hydrogenating soy isn't good. That creates trans fats. So if it's too processed, and a lot of Japanese food is very processed. So even if it's not genetically modified, really processed soy I worry about. I avoid processed soy oil in any way. But I don't view Japanese food safety with the same skepticism that I do China. So I hope that answered your question. Are you guys still worried about man boobs? I was dying to look into this. because, I mean, there's a lot of people that are very, very against soy. The Weston Price Foundation in particular, they're always saying soy is evil. You know, and the reality is, it is for some people. Like I said with the thyroid issue, certain people are sensitive, and it's going to be a problem. But most people aren't. What about soy sauce? It doesn't seem very soy-y. Agreed. Soy sauce. This is interesting. So, yeah, it's really, you're right, it doesn't seem very soy-like. I haven't read, okay, so I haven't looked into soy sauce. This is actually really interesting. Now I kind of want to do this. If I have time, I'll do this and put it in the show notes. I mean, it's, okay, so one thing for sure is it's definitely processed, right? I believe shoot, I wish I knew more about how it was made. I would guess that there's good soy sauce and bad soy sauce, and I probably am guilty of eating the bad soy sauce all the time. But I'm not sure. So I'm going to have to get back to you on this one. I definitely know it has a lot of salt in it, so that can be problematic for some people. But you know, it's one of those things. I mean, how much soy sauce are you eating? If you're eating a lot, I mean, there's problems with that generally. Regarding all these other issues, the breast cancer and all that stuff, I don't think it's a significant contributor of soy protein or soy, like other things. I'm not sure, so I'll have to get back to you on that. Sorry. I agree. It seems like processed food. This is an interesting question. Is light miso soup better than dark miso soup? Well, a couple things here. One is so there's lots of different kinds of miso that I've seen at the store. I'm not sure actually. You guys are asking good questions. I'm not sure actually what is the difference between the lighter and the darker. Like it's got to be in the processing. I don't know if it's the amount of time they were fermented or what. But one thing that's important to keep in mind is that if you want the probiotic benefit of miso anyway, the miso needs to not be cooked. So I usually add miso to my salad dressing, actually, just like a little scoop for the gastrointestinal benefits. But I don't know about the other stuff. I imagine that cooked miso would still be good for the breast cancer and all that stuff. But like I said, like the health benefits of soy, you know, after going through all that literature, I feel like they're probably on par with any other food that's like a natural food. And so, you know, until you get into these fermented things where you get probiotics and other added benefits. But another thing that it was in my notes, but I must have skipped over it. The benefits of soy for heart disease, it aren't greater than the benefits of any other bean. So all beans have a beneficial effect on cholesterol. So anyway, I kind of got off topic there, but yeah, I don't know the difference. Actually, let me check the chat room. Does anybody know? I love soy sauce. Soy sauce is tasty. Not gonna lie. I like to cook garlic and chili flakes. Add a little soy sauce. It just smells amazing. Where do I get my miso from? I actually got my last batch from some fancy organic place at my Buy Right Market, which is my go-to sort of healthy grocery store. But, you know, I see misos everywhere. I just try to make sure that the beans are not from China, whatever I buy. That's sort of my number one. And preferably organic, so they're not genetically modified, supposedly. Although even the organic ones, here's what Monsanto does. They like contaminate the organic ones with like nearby fields. They cross-pollinate, and then they sue the farmer for stealing their patented gene. And then also the farmer can't call his stuff organic anymore. It's terrible. Yeah, it's really sad to me, the state of soy in sort of the developed world. Like, it's really sad that you can't get Like, it's so hard to get good old-fashioned soy products. Not that we need them. It's just, one of the reasons I think they're so popular is because they're so versatile. You can do so much with a soybean. And, but it's just hard to trust anything these days. So do we have any more questions? Any burning questions? Are you guys happy with my answers on breast cancer and prostate cancer? I didn't actually realize it was so beneficial in prostate cancer. I think that's really cool. It's good to know because, prostate cancer is one of those things that runs pretty strongly in families. So if you're at risk for prostate cancer, you're welcome to ask me your question about chewing. Yeah, if you can ask me questions about anything, feel free. Okay, this is a really good question. So Shannon asks, should soy be one of the primary sources of protein? If not, what should? So I talk about this a little bit in the healthy vegetarian and vegan diet episode, which of course I'll link to. There's a weird thing where people worry that they're not getting enough protein. Everybody gets enough protein in first world countries. This is not a first world problem. So that, beans besides soy have protein. I eat beans a lot. I love them. Beans and lentils, they're delicious, they're filling, they make you lose weight, they're amazing. Grains also have protein too. Fish is a great source of protein. Thank you, Virginia, for pointing that out in the chat room. Meat is still an excellent source of protein. Eggs are an excellent source of protein. I recommend mixing it up, not just getting it from one place. Cheese is a good source of protein. This sort of, I'd say, myth that your protein needs to be complete, which means that it can't be lacking any amino acid, is sort of irrelevant if you're eating a diverse diet. So yeah, if you're subsisting only on corn and greens, you're going to be missing lysine, and it's going to be a problem. But if you're eating beans regularly, eggs regularly, grains regularly, fish, meat, you can be totally vegetarian and get plenty of protein, way more than you need, without ever touching soy. So, it can be a healthy source of protein. Like I said, I eat soybeans, and I get my tofu from these places that are great, but you definitely don't need it to be. So definitely don't worry about that. I hope that answered your question. Oh, this is interesting. So James wants to know, what is my opinion of Japanese soy products? Well, I don't really have an opinion. I know that Japan definitely doesn't have the food safety issues that China has. Their regulations are much more strict. That being said, they do like their junk food, and be careful so hydrolyzing soy is not good. I think that creates MSG. One of my readers told me that the other day. Hydrogenating soy isn't good. That creates trans fats. So if it's too processed, and a lot of Japanese food is very processed. So even if it's not genetically modified, really processed soy I worry about. I avoid processed soy oil in any way. But I don't view Japanese food safety with the same skepticism that I do China. So I hope that answered your question. Are you guys still worried about man boobs? I was dying to look into this. Because, there's a lot of people that are very, very against soy. The Weston Price Foundation in particular, they're always saying soy is evil. And the reality is, it is for some people. Like I said with the thyroid issue, certain people are sensitive, and it's going to be a problem. But most people aren't. What about soy sauce? It doesn't seem very soy-y. Agreed. Soy sauce. This is interesting. So, yeah, it's really, you're right, it doesn't seem very soy-like. I haven't read, okay, so I haven't looked into soy sauce. This is actually really interesting. Now I kind of want to do this. If I have time, I'll do this and put it in the show notes. I mean, it's, okay, so one thing for sure is it's definitely processed, right? I believe shoot, I wish I knew more about how it was made. I would guess that there's good soy sauce and bad soy sauce, and I probably am guilty of eating the bad soy sauce all the time. But I'm not sure. So I'm going to have to get back to you on this one. I definitely know it has a lot of salt in it, so that can be problematic for some people. But you know, it's one of those things. I mean, how much soy sauce are you eating? If you're eating a lot, I mean, there's problems with that generally. Regarding all these other issues, the breast cancer and all that stuff, I don't think it's a significant contributor of soy protein or soy, like other things. I'm not sure, so I'll have to get back to you on that. Sorry. I agree. It seems like processed food. This is an interesting question. Is light miso soup better than dark miso soup? Well, a couple things here. One is so there's lots of different kinds of miso that I've seen at the store. I'm not sure actually. You guys are asking good questions. I'm not sure actually what is the difference between the lighter and the darker. Like it's got to be in the processing. I don't know if it's the amount of time they were fermented or what. But one thing that's important to keep in mind is that if you want the probiotic benefit of miso anyway, the miso needs to not be cooked. So I usually add miso to my salad dressing, actually, just like a little scoop for the gastrointestinal benefits. But I don't know about the other stuff. I imagine that cooked miso would still be good for the breast cancer and all that stuff. But like I said, like the health benefits of soy, you know, after going through all that literature, I feel like they're probably on par with any other food that's like a natural food. And so, you know, until you get into these fermented things where you get probiotics and other added benefits. But another thing that it was in my notes, but I must have skipped over it. The benefits of soy for heart disease, it aren't greater than the benefits of any other bean. So all beans have a beneficial effect on cholesterol. So anyway, I kind of got off topic there, but yeah, I don't know the difference. Actually, let me check the chat room. Does anybody know? I love soy sauce. Soy sauce is tasty. Not gonna lie. I like to cook garlic and chili flakes. Add a little soy sauce. It just smells amazing. Where do I get my miso from? I actually got my last batch from some fancy organic place at my Buy Right Market, which is my go-to sort of healthy grocery store. But, you know, I see misos everywhere. I just try to make sure that the beans are not from China, whatever I buy. That's sort of my number one. And preferably organic, so they're not genetically modified, supposedly. Although even the organic ones, here's what Monsanto does. They like contaminate the organic ones with like nearby fields. They cross-pollinate, and then they sue the farmer for stealing their patented gene. And then also the farmer can't call his stuff organic anymore. It's terrible. Yeah, it's really sad to me, the state of soy in sort of the developed world. Like, it's really sad that you can't get, like, it's so hard to get good old-fashioned soy products. You know, not that we need them, it's just, you know, one of the reasons I think they're so popular is because they're so versatile. You can do so much with a soybean. And, you know, but it's just hard to trust anything these days. So do we have any more questions? Any burning questions? Are you guys happy with my answers on breast cancer and prostate cancer? I didn't actually realize it was so beneficial in prostate cancer. I think that's really cool. It's good to know because, I mean, prostate cancer is one of those things that runs pretty strongly in families. So if you're at risk for prostate cancer, you're welcome to ask me your question about chewing. Yeah, if you can ask me questions about anything, feel free. Oh yeah, but I was saying that yeah, if prostate cancer does run in your family, it might be worth having that little extra soy. You don't have to worry about being demasculinized or growing man boobs. I actually didn't see anything about man boobs. All the benefits or all the problems that I saw were all like downstairs problems, not upstairs problems. Are you asking your question about chewing in the other part? Oh, yeah, there it is. Oh, sweet. Oh, it's not about chewing, but you can bring your chewing question. It's welcome. Oh, this is interesting. So can a genetically modified food be considered organic? No, not right now, luckily. But these are the things that like I sign petitions for all the time. So I'm a member. It's a little bit of an annoying organization, the Organic Consumers Association, because they tend to use sort of scare tactics in their headlines and stuff, and I feel like they don't need to do that because they're like the good guys, but whatever. They're like a watchdog for all this like organic stuff, and they're really good about sending out petitions that are like, hey, they're trying to create genetically modified food and not label it and blah blah blah. So right now, genetically modified food can't be organic, but if it's not organic, it's not labeled, I believe. So you don't know if a non-organic food is genetically modified or not. So you can generally assume that if it has any soy in it, that it is. But this is a big issue right now because people hate genetically modified labels. Like there was a survey I tweeted out on MSNBC or something like that the other day. It was like 96% of people thought it was like fair to label food as genetically modified. And still, and that's why the country or the companies don't want to do it, because they know that it'll affect the bottom line, it'll affect sales, and they swear that it's still safe. But it's like, that's not the only issue. Even if it's safe for me to eat a genetically modified food, which I've genetically modified many organisms in my day. I've worked in a genetics lab for the last decade. And, you know, that science alone doesn't scare me. It's what else it's doing to the ecosystem that's scary, and what else it's doing to the farmers that I want to support. So, you know, their argument is that it's just as safe, but I think that it should be labeled for many reasons. And if there's no reason food shouldn't be labeled properly. That's my take. So, no, GMO food is not organic. And this is interesting. Does dehydrated food count as processed food? I eat Brad's raw kale chips, but they're dehydrated. I'd say it's mildly processed. You know, it still looks like a kale chip, right? It still looks like kale, so it's not that bad. But, you know, it's the cell walls and stuff are probably going to be broken down a little bit, so you'll probably digest it a little faster. That can actually be beneficial sometimes. You know, cooking, which is a form of processing food, can make foods more, or make nutrients more bioavailable because, you know, there can be elements that are bound up in certain things inside the cell that, because of all the fiber and stuff in there, that you wouldn't necessarily get to in large quantities. But, you know, if you process it a teeny bit, they become more accessible to your digestive system. So, you know, I definitely wouldn't say that kale chips are bad for you. I mean, unless they're like sprinkled with, you know, poison or something. But, you know, as long as the ingredients are things that you feel comfortable with, I'd say that's fine. Don't sprinkle poison on your food. What about sprouted foods? So sprouted foods are a whole different thing. That they're the opposite of processed. They've been sprouted to become alive. And some people argue that they're more nutritious, and other people argue that it actually, soaking helps get rid of some of the phytates and other anti-nutrients that can be found in some beans and grains and nuts. I don't worry about those things too much, but yeah, sprouted foods are supposed to be extra healthy, not less healthy, not less processed, or not processed in a bad way. Oh, you were going to call in a video? You can still call in a video. We have 8 minutes. Virginia says, darn, you mean I have to stop sprinkling my food with poison? I guess I'll try salt next time. Amazing. Oh, no, look, your call's here. Sweet. Let's see if this works. Oh, hey.
Yay.
What's your question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my question was about chewing, and like if we chew a lot while we're eating, aren't we speeding digestion, and don't we want to slow down digestion?
That is an awesome question. And I've actually found that there's two sort of schools of thought. So yes, you are assisting with digestion, and I guess you can call it speeding it up. But it does a couple things. It slows down the rate at which food hits your stomach. And so that itself will slow it down to some extent, instead of just like, swallowing like giant pieces of unchewed food. Also, it gives you better access to the nutrients. So I have seen some things that it can actually improve your increase your glycemic response, which sounds bad and scary. But I think overall you end up eating a lot less because the satiety signals get to you sooner, and you absorb more of the nutrients from your food, and you feel more satisfied for a longer period of time. So everything I've read has said it's actually very beneficial to chew. The more the merrier.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. Awesome. I love video calls. Thank you. Destina. I should have asked you how to pronounce your name. Thanks for calling in. Well, it looks like unless anybody has any more questions, we're just about to wrap up. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to go read about soy sauce and miso. And we'll try to add something about that in the show notes for next week when I post this. So if you're watching the recorded version on iTunes or YouTube, head over to Summer Tomato, and you can find those there. And next show, good question. So I haven't scheduled the next show yet. Assume it's going to probably be in 2 weeks, probably 2 weeks from today. But I'm still trying to get some interviews lined up. So if I do end up getting an interview, it'll depend on that person's schedule. But if I don't do an interview and I just do a regular show, it'll just be at the regular time. I like Tuesdays, and I like 6 o'clock. So that'll probably be it. But I will let you know. I know you're subscribers, so you'll get the email soon. And if anybody has any show topics they want me to cover, let me know, because people have sort of stopped sending me topic ideas, and I don't know if it's because I keep picking them myself and you guys like them, but I want to answer your questions. So let me know what you have to say, and thank you for tuning in. And once again, if you're not a subscriber, you can participate by signing up at tinyletter.com/summertomato. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.